A stranger at the gym has a tattoo of my mother's face. When I went to talk to him, I found out that. I saw him for the first time on a Tuesday, the kind of unremarkable morning where the fluorescent lights at Gold's Gym hummed their monotonous tune, and the smell of rubber mats mixed with disinfectant filled my lungs. I was 34 years old, a creature of habit who measured my life in careful routines. Wake at 5:30, black coffee, 45 minutes of cardio, weights, shower, library by 8. Structure kept the grief at bay. Structure kept me from drowning in the silence my mother left behind when she died 14 months ago. I was on the elliptical third machine from the left as always when I noticed him. A man, maybe mid-40s, with the kind of build that came from real work, not vanity. Broad shoulders, weathered hands gripping the barbell with familiarity. But it wasn't his physique that made my rhythm falter, my foot slipping on the pedal with a jarring clang. It was his left forearm, exposed as he adjusted his grip. A tattoo. A woman's face, rendered in hyper-realistic detail. Every shadow and highlight so precise it looked like a photograph embedded in his skin. The woman was my mother. Not the mother I knew. The one who wore cardigans and baked on Sundays, who hummed old gospel songs while folding laundry, whose hands were always soft with cocoa butter. This woman was younger, maybe 25, with her hair pulled back tight, her jaw set in a way I'd never seen. There was something fierce in her eyes, something defiant and alive that made my chest constrict. But the cheekbones were hers. The slight asymmetry of her smile was hers. The small scar above her left eyebrow, barely visible, was definitely hers. I stopped the machine mid-stride, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Around me, the gym continued its morning choreography, weights clanging, treadmills whirring, people absorbed in their own worlds. But mine had just tilted sideways. For 3 weeks, I watched him. I became a spy in my own sanctuary, timing my workouts to match his, positioning myself where I could observe without being obvious. Julian. I learned from overhearing the front desk staff. He came Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, always between 6 and 7:30. He was methodical in his routine, respectful to others, and kept mostly to himself. He had a slight limp in his right leg that he tried to hide, and every single time he adjusted his sleeves, every time that tattoo came into view, I felt like I was looking at a stranger wearing my mother's face. My mind created 1,000 scenarios, each more disturbing than the last. Was he obsessed with her? Had he stalked her? Maybe he was a patient from the hospital where she'd worked as a nurse. Though she'd always been administrative, behind a desk, nothing dramatic or dangerous. Maybe there was an affair. That thought made my stomach turn. My parents had been married 37 years when my father died of a heart attack 6 years ago. My mother had grieved him genuinely, completely. Or so I'd thought. But what did I really know? I'd been so certain I knew everything about Lena Morrison. She was my mother, my only family after Dad passed. We had dinner every Sunday. She called me every Tuesday evening at 7. She was gentle, predictable, safe. The woman in that tattoo looked like she'd never been safe a day in her life. I started having nightmares. In them, my mother had a whole other life, a family I didn't know about, secrets that rendered our relationship a lie. I'd wake up gasping, reaching for my phone to look at pictures of her, trying to reconcile the woman who'd raised me with the stranger on Julian's arm. The gym, once my refuge from grief, became a place of torment. But I kept going. I had to know. It was a Friday in late October when I finally found my courage. Julian was by the free weights, working through a set of shoulder presses with focused intensity. I'd rehearsed what I'd say 100 times, but as I approached, every planned word evaporated. My hands were shaking. My mouth was dry. "Excuse me," I said, my voice smaller than I'd intended. He looked up, and I saw kindness in his eyes before I saw anything else. Deep brown eyes that had seen things, held things. "Yeah? Your tattoo," I pointed, unable to form a more eloquent sentence. "On your arm. That woman." His expression shifted immediately, softening into something reverent and sad. He set down the weights carefully, wiped his hands on his shorts and straightened to his full height, maybe 6'2". "You know her?" "She's my mother." The words came out strangled. She died. Last year, September. The color drained from his face. For a long moment, he just stared at me, processing. Then his eyes welled up, and this big, battle-scarred man looked like he might break. Lena, he whispered. Lena Morrison. How do you know her? I demanded, fear making me sharp. Why do you have her face on your body? Who are you? My name is Julian Reeves, he said quietly, and your mother saved my life. I owe her everything. We ended up at a coffee shop 2 blocks away, sitting across from each other in a corner booth while the mid-morning crowd buzzed around us. Julian ordered black coffee and held the mug like it might anchor him. I couldn't drink anything. My whole body was vibrating with anticipation and dread. How much did she tell you about her 20s? He asked. She was a nurse. She met my dad when she was 26. They got married a year later. The facts felt thin, even as I said them. Julian nodded slowly. She was a nurse, that's true. But not the kind you're thinking. From 19 to 28, your mother worked for International Medical Corps, providing emergency medical care in conflict zones. She was a combat medic, Alara, one of the best. The name felt wrong coming from his mouth, too familiar. But I couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was saying. My mother. The woman who fainted at the sight of blood in TV shows? Who kept our medicine cabinet organized by expiration date and wouldn't even let me play contact sports in high school because it was too dangerous. In 1989, I was a Marine, Julian continued, his voice steady but heavy with memory. We were on a peacekeeping mission in Lebanon that went south fast. Our convoy was ambushed on a supply run outside Beirut. IED took out the lead vehicle, small arms fire from both sides. 5 of us were hit, separated from the main unit. Command evacuated what they could, but they left us. Said the area was too hot, that we were gone. His hands tightened around the mug. We should have been. 3 of us died in the first hour. It was just me, a kid named Marcus Thompson, and our CO, Captain Sarah Chen. We dragged ourselves into the ruins of what used to be a school, bleeding out, no comms, no hope. I'd taken shrapnel to my leg and abdomen. Marcus had a chest wound. Sarah's arm was half gone. We had maybe hours left. And my mother found you, I said, the words feeling surreal in my mouth. She didn't just find us. She fought for us. Julian's eyes held mine, and I saw the tattoo again in my peripheral vision. That fierce, determined woman. The IMC team had been ordered to evacuate too, pull back to the secured zone. But your mother heard about the attack, knew there might be survivors. She took a local volunteer, a translator named Ahmad, and drove straight into hell to find us. No escort, no backup. Just a Red Cross flag and pure guts. He paused, swallowing hard. I'll never forget the sound of that Jeep, or seeing her run toward us through the rubble. She was 24 years old, Alara, 24. And she looked at my wounds, at Marcus's, at Sarah's, and she didn't hesitate. She set up a field hospital in that ruined school and told us nobody was dying on her watch. My coffee had gone cold in front of me. I couldn't look away from his face, from the raw emotion there. She stayed? For 3 days. The area was still active. Sporadic gunfire, unstable buildings. The whole place could have been shelled any minute. Ahmad begged her to leave, to at least move us, but moving would have killed Marcus and Sarah. So she stayed. She operated on Sarah's arm with supplies meant for basic first aid. She kept Marcus breathing when his lung collapsed. She pulled shrapnel out of my gut with tweezers and sewed me up with dental floss because that's all we had. Julian wiped his eyes roughly. She sang to us. When the pain got too bad, when we thought we wouldn't make it, she sang old songs, hymns, soul music, whatever she could remember. She told us about home, about the life she wanted to have someday. A quiet life, she said. A safe life with a family and Sunday dinners and nothing more dangerous than deciding what to cook. She made us promise that if we lived, we'd do the same. We'd find peace. How did you get out? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. On day 4, a UN convoy came through for supply distribution. Your mother flagged them down, negotiated our transport. By then, local fighters had heard about the American medic treating anyone who came to her, no questions asked. We had protection we didn't even know about. People who would have killed us on sight were guarding that school because of her. He shook his head in wonder. She had this way about her, this quiet authority. She could look at armed men twice her size and make them listen, make them care. What happened after? Did you stay in touch? For a while. She came back to the States a few months later, settled down like she'd promised herself. Met your father, started her life over. She wanted to leave that part of herself behind. The danger, the trauma, the constant fear. She became the person she'd dreamed about being in that ruined school, and I respected that. We all did. Me, Marcus, Sarah. We'd check in once a year, just to make sure everyone kept their promise, stayed alive, stayed at peace. Julian pulled out his phone, scrolled through it, then handed it to me. On the screen was a photo from what looked like a military reunion. 4 people. Julian, a black woman with gray-streaked hair, a shorter Asian woman with a prosthetic arm, and my mother. My mother, maybe in her 50s, smiling in a way I recognized but wearing a leather jacket I'd never seen. They had their arms around each other like family. This was 7 years ago, Julian said. Our annual meetup. We kept the tradition even after your father passed. Your mother never told you about us? I shook my head, unable to speak. A whole dimension of her life, completely hidden. Not just hidden, deliberately erased. She wanted to protect you, Julian said gently. She told me once, this was maybe 3 years ago, that giving you a safe, normal childhood was her greatest accomplishment. She said she'd seen too much violence, too much loss. She wanted you to grow up knowing stability, security, love without fear. So she gave you the mother you needed, not the one she used to be. But I needed to know her, I said, and my voice cracked. The real her, not some sanitized version. You knew the real her, Alara. He gestured to the tattoo. This was just one chapter. The mother who raised you, who called you every Tuesday, who made you feel safe. That was real too. That was the woman she chose to become. That took its own kind of courage. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to rage at her for the deception, for dying before I could know this part of her. But all I felt was a profound, aching sadness mixed with something else. Pride, maybe. Awe. I have something for you, Julian said. He reached into the gym bag he'd brought, pulled out a weathered leather journal and a bundle of letters tied with string. She made me promise. If anything happened to her, I was supposed to give these to you. She said you'd be ready when you were ready. My hands trembled as I took them. The journal was worn, its pages yellowed. My mother's handwriting filled the first page I opened, younger and messier than the careful script I knew. I read, Day 47 in Beirut. Treated 6 patients today. 2 children, 1 pregnant woman, 3 men with shrapnel wounds. The shelling is getting closer. Ahmad says we should evacuate. But how can I leave when I'm the only one who can help? How can I choose my safety over their lives? I flipped through pages of entries, each one revealing a woman I'd never known. She wrote about fear and purpose, about the weight of holding someone's life in her hands, about missing home while knowing she couldn't leave. There were sketches in the margins, faces of people she'd treated, maps of places I'd never heard of, even a few rough drawings of medical procedures. The letters were different. Some were addressed to her parents, never sent. Others were to my father from their early courtship. But several were addressed to me, written over the years but never delivered. I opened one dated 5 years ago. My dearest Alara, if you're reading this, I'm gone and Julian has kept his promise. I'm sorry for the secrets, baby. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. But I need you to understand. Every choice I made was about giving you a different life than the one I had. When I was your age, I believed purpose meant danger, that making a difference required sacrifice. And maybe it did, back then. But then I became your mother, and I learned that the greatest act of courage is choosing peace, choosing to build something gentle and safe in a world that's neither. I don't regret who I was. Those people I saved, the lives I touched, that mattered. But you matter more. You always did. I wanted you to grow up brave without having to be fearless, strong without having to be hard. I wanted you to know love that doesn't demand sacrifice. If you're angry, I understand. If you feel betrayed, I accept that. But know that every bedtime story, every skinned knee I kissed, every quiet moment we shared, that was the truest version of me. The woman I became for you was not a lie. She was my greatest triumph. Live your life, baby, however you choose. Just promise me you'll be kind to yourself in the process. All my love, always, Mom. I couldn't see the page anymore through my tears. Julian sat quietly, giving me space to break down in the middle of this crowded coffee shop. When I finally looked up, he was crying too. She talked about you all the time, he said. She was so proud. You were her proof that choosing peace was worth it. Over the next several weeks, Julian introduced me to the others. Marcus Thompson was a high school principal in Atlanta, married with 3 kids, coaching Little League on weekends. Sarah Chen ran a veterans support center in Portland, her prosthetic arm decorated with stickers her grandchildren had chosen. Both of them lit up when they talked about my mother, sharing stories that painted her as fierce and funny, strategic and impossibly brave. We met quarterly after that, this unconventional family bound by my mother's legacy. They told me about the others she'd saved over her 9 years with IMC. Dozens of people across multiple continents, each one carrying a piece of her courage forward. Julian's tattoo wasn't unique. Sarah had one too, smaller, on her shoulder. Marcus carried a photo of her in his wallet, the same fierce young woman captured in ink. The gym became my sanctuary again, but different now. I worked out harder, pushed myself further, honoring the strength my mother had shown. I started volunteering at a local clinic that served refugees and immigrants, using my library science skills to help them navigate systems, access resources, find their footing in an unfamiliar place. It wasn't combat medicine, but it was service. It was purpose. I also started writing. Nothing fancy, just my own journal, documenting the stories Julian, Marcus, and Sarah shared, preserving my mother's hidden history. Sometimes I'd write letters to her, telling her about my day, asking her questions I wished I could hear her answer. It became its own kind of conversation, a way to know her better in death than I had in life. The grief didn't disappear, but it transformed. Instead of mourning the woman I thought I knew, I celebrated the one I was discovering. I put up a photo in my apartment, the one from their reunion, my mother smiling with her chosen family. Next to it, I framed one of her journal sketches, a rough drawing of hands holding a heart. Underneath, she'd written, "The bravest thing I ever did was choose to be gentle." A year after meeting Julian, I got my own tattoo. Not my mother's face. That was their tribute, earned through shared trauma and survival. Mine was simpler. Her handwriting, the last line of that letter she'd written me. Be kind to yourself in the process. It sits on my inner wrist, where I can see it whenever I need the reminder. I think about her differently now. Not as the woman who kept secrets, but as someone who understood that identity is complex, that we contain multitudes. She was the fearless medic who ran toward danger. She was the gentle mother who made me feel safe. She was both and she was neither, and she was wholly, completely herself. The people we think we know best often hold the deepest secrets. But maybe those secrets aren't betrayals. Maybe they're gifts, waiting for the right moment to be unwrapped. My mother gave me a childhood free from her trauma, a foundation of safety from which I could choose my own adventures. And then, through Julian and that tattoo, she gave me permission to be more than one thing, to honor both the peace and the courage. I still go to the gym 3 days a week. Sometimes I see Julian there, and we work out in comfortable silence, 2 people carrying the same woman's legacy in different ways. And sometimes when I'm pushing through that last rep, when my muscles are screaming and my resolve is wavering, I think about a 24-year-old woman singing hymns in a ruined school, refusing to let anyone die on her watch. That's when I push harder. That's when I remember that strength comes in many forms, and the bravest thing any of us can do is choose, again and again, how we want to show up in the world. My mother chose peace without surrendering her power. She chose gentleness without abandoning her strength. And in doing so, she taught me that our truest legacy isn't the secrets we keep or the stories we hide. It's the lives we touch, the people we save. Sometimes in dramatic fashion, sometimes simply by being present, consistent, and kind. I carry her with me now, not just in memory, but in action. And every Tuesday evening at 7, I pause whatever I'm doing, pour a cup of tea, and spend a few minutes in silence, honoring the woman who was everything I needed her to be, and so much more than I ever knew. That's the thing about love and legacy. They're never quite what we expect. But if we're open to it, if we're brave enough to face the truth beneath the surface, we might just discover that the people we've lost are never truly gone. They live on in the choices we make, the kindness we offer, the courage we claim as our own. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, a stranger at the gym will have a tattoo that changes everything, that cracks open our understanding and reveals the hero hiding in plain sight all along.